Can an agent work for both the seller and the buyer of a property at the same time? That is the major point of discussion in this presentation. We're also going to have a quick look at the new rules around requesting and accepting gifts or benefits. So back to the main point of the presentation. Can an agent help somebody buy a property and sell a property at the same time? Now, there is always confusion around this point, and I would suggest it comes from two areas. The first one is that prior to the changes to the legislation earlier this year, in New South Wales, we did in fact have a separate individual standalone license called a buyer's agent license. And there was always confusion around whether you needed one of those in order to act as a buyer's agent, or whether you could rely on the capacity of a full agent acting as a buyer's agent and or a vendor's agent. They've clarified that by removing the standalone buyer's agency license, such that there is only now one license that is available, that being a real estate agent's license. And with that license, you can act as a buyer agent or as a seller's agent, which has in fact always been the case. So to some extent, whether you can act for both parties has been confused in the past by the existence of a separate little license called a buyer's agent license. That's now been altered. So now all we have available is a real estate agent's license, and with that license now, and in the past as well, you can indeed act for a buyer or a seller as an agent and get remunerated. So the question now becomes, if I can do both, if I can be both buyer's agent and seller's agent, what are the rules around that? Section 48 is where you need to look for clarity on this. Section 48 has two subsections, subsection 1 and 2. And together they make it very clear, and I'll revert to the diagram here that I've got, make it very clear that an agent can act for a vendor, and we're going to make an assumption here, as would be the case in most situations, that there's an agency agreement between the agent and the vendor, and let's just say that's for X% commission. The fact that there's an agency agreement between the vendor and the agent means that there is a fiduciary relationship that's now come into existence. That's very important, right? And at the same time, it's possible for the agent to act for a purchaser, and that would also require an agency agreement to be filled out, and let's assume that's for Y% commission. Now, we all know that agents are able to act for sellers and buyers, but can they do it on the same property at the same time? On the same property at the same time. Now that is illegal. That's what Section 48 says. Whether you are signing an agreement or acting in the capacity of an agent, either one. In other words, if you're earning money or if you're doing it without a fee. Okay? What do I mean by that? A lot of people will come to me and say, Craig, I'm acting for a vendor. I am going to charge that vendor X% to be their agent, but I'm also going to be acting for a purchaser, and I'm not going to charge them any money. I'm not going to charge them any money, but I am going to act for them, in which case I'm going to create a fiduciary relationship with them. That is also considered to be illegal. It doesn't matter whether you are charging a fee to the purchaser or the vendor. The fact that you're in a fiduciary relationship with them is what matters. So, and that fiduciary relationship is typically grounded in an agency agreement. So don't be confused by the fact that, well, I'm really working for the vendor and I'm charging them a fee and I'm the vendor's agent, but I'm also going to help the buyer on the same property, but I'm not going to charge them a fee. That is not going to avoid contravention of the section, okay? What you can, however, do if you are an agent, so here's my agent, I can work for the vendor to sell their property. Let's assume I've made up an address here, 21 John Street, Manly. So I'm helping the vendor sell a property with an agency agreement, create my fiduciary relationship, all is well. I can, at the same time, yes, I can help a purchaser buy a property, not the same property, a property, and therefore I would enter into an agency agreement and I would charge that by whatever % we've agreed in the agency agreement on another property. Let's say that's number, 48 Smith Street, Glebe. Okay, so I'm helping the vendor sell 21 John Street, Manly. agency agreement, all good, percentage, and I'm helping at the same time, I'm helping a purchaser buy 46 Smith Street, Glebe. I've signed up an agency agreement with them and I'm charging them with it. That is absolutely fine. That is not a contravention of Section 48. So maybe in simple terms, yes, an agent can act for both vendors and purchasers at the same time, as long as it's not on the same property. Now, perhaps a discussion for another time would be relating to, can I offer these services from the same office? An agent working next to another agent under the one banner. That is a discussion that we might leave for another time, because it deals with confidentiality and, Chinese walls and so forth. So let's leave that discussion for another time. Let's present the basic facts in this presentation. Now, just to finish off this diagram, you would agree that one of the main reasons why the law says what it does about acting on the same property at the same time is because of a conflict of interest. So you would all appreciate that if I'm acting for the vendor, I'm trying to get the best deal possible for that vendor. And if I'm acting for a purchaser, then it's fair to say that I'm trying to get the best deal on the exact opposite arrangement. So there's obviously a conflict of interest between me acting for both parties at the same time on the same property, which is why we have Section 48, and it's very clear. Now, a related topic to that, this conflict of interest aspect, which permeates lots of issues in agency practice, is the new Section 53F. Section 53F of the legislation, new section, which says that you cannot accept or request a gift or benefit in certain circumstances. And I think it's worth me just reading this new section and paraphrasing it, right? So you cannot request or accept a gift or benefit in circumstances, listen to this wording, right, that may reasonably be considered to give rise to a conflict of interest. That's what the basic requirement. Cannot receive or accept, request or accept, I should say, a gift or benefit that may give rise to, or reasonably give rise to, a conflict of interest, unless there's a few exceptions. Unless it's a gift from your employer, your boss, that doesn't count. Or if it's a gift that is part of an agency agreement, or from a client who is very satisfied and grateful for the services performed under an agency agreement, that also doesn't come into the equation. And the final one is if the gift is below a certain value. Now, the value happens to be prescribed in the regulations. If you go to Schedule 1, New Rule 21, it says there that the amount is $60. So you can, if it's above $60, then you're caught by the provision. If it's below $60, it's not caught by that provision. But it does give rise to the question of, well, in order to make sure that nobody can point a finger at me in respect of Section 53F, maybe I should keep a gift register. And that is definitely what we would be suggesting. So if you're in your office or your practice, if you want to avoid the issue of whether or not you've breached the act or not with gifting, keep a gift register, and in that register note all the gifts that you receive, the circumstances that you receive them in, the value, so that you are clear in your own mind whether you've in breach or not, in which case you should reject the gift. And if it comes within the provisions of Section 53F, you can then point to the register and say, I am compliant. I'm hoping that those two topics, acting for the vendor and the purchaser at the same time, and the rules around gifting, have been useful to you. My name is Craig Swan. I would always appreciate and welcome your comments and critique. You can reach me through Instagram at Craig_Leverage Group, or you can reach me via email, Craig Swan, SWAN, at leveragegroup.com.au. I'm wishing you all the very best in your endeavors in the world of agency, and as usual, happy hunting.